on this project, we did a microtopping. Now, that sounds pretty easy, but at the same time, we had less than 1/8 of a clearance of concrete to put down over top of subflooring. We had a lot of challenges we had to deal with. The main one being this back room over here had 1.5 inches of slope. This was meant to be screened in, and this was all going to be open, so they put 1.5 inches of slope on here. So we had to use self-leveler and level all this up, and we really ended up with a nice smooth transition by the time that we were done. This was, you'll see through the process, there's a lot of steps in this, but really it's a nice look at the end. We did our platform down here. We got our turn down edge that we did 4 inches thick to make it look like a concrete slab. Was actually poured across here like this, and they're gonna end up painting all these walls. And so yeah, we'll just do a quick walkthrough real quick and check out this floor. There's a lot of dust on here right now, yeah, once it's clean and they get everything moved in, one of the things I do want to point out is there's no lighting yet. So the only lighting you see is coming through the window. So you'll notice how dark this floor looks right now, but there's no overhead lights. When you walk up this way, you'll see the light from the window and how charcoal this looks. And that's basically what it's going to look like. It's not going to be so dark like this. So we did this whole big room out here, the kitchen, and then this is going to be like a laundry room, washroom. And then we got back in here. This is, I believe this is the master bedroom. And once again, we're going to show you how we did every step, also scored all these lines and grouted all this to make it look like big tiles. And then here's the bathroom. And we went right up to the shower, and they're going to be running a metal strip around there. This will be a glass shower, so we went right up there flush to that. So stay tuned. We're going to show you all the steps. Let us know if you have any questions, and appreciate you watching.
What's up, guys? All right, so on this project here, we are up in Blue Ridge, Georgia. This is another beautiful, this is actually like a modern, contemporary, really cool style house build by MC Butler Construction. A lot of the projects you guys see us do are for him. I'm going to turn this thing around and I'm going to explain to you what we're doing. So that house up there we did a few years ago. I know you can't see it very good, but it's really a pretty badass house. Those beams right there in the front are 30 feet tall. Did a bunch of modern concrete steps around the house, a patio, and then the whole inside of the house is all microtopping. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Up there, we did microtopping on all the floors. We did microtopping on 2 fireplaces, one of them being 20 foot tall. That was a little different up there. So the difference is they allowed for room to put down hardy board, cement board, so we can microtop right over that. On this house, you can see right here at the threshold, there's no clearance. There's literally 1/8 of an inch of clearance here. So we have to go right over top of this wood substrate, which we have never done. And we've talked to some friends of ours, some colleagues that have done this with great success, but it is pretty extensive as far as prep work goes, because you're going over top of wood and you got to make sure your concrete bonds to this. This is another area right here that is going to be a challenge. This was going to be a screen enclosed exterior porch. So from this line right here where my finger is, there was 1.5 inches of slope out that way. So what they did is they put 3/4 inch plywood, and then they notched it down and went to 1/2 inch and then 1/4 inch, so it kind of gradually tapers down. So the guys have now went through and made sure that all of our nail heads are down or flush. You want to make sure there's nothing sticking up, no nails, no screws, no anything at all. And they've done that across the floor. They swept everything to get any loose debris off. And now the next step is to sand this floor. So what we're doing is we've just got palm sanders, this little square sander right here. Started with 100 grit, switched to 60 grit, and you can see we're just running it down here. We're basically just trying to clean this floor, this wood substrate, and make sure that our epoxy bonds good to that. And then we have our floor buffer here, swing machine, whatever you want to call it. This has an 80 grit sanding screen, and you can see running it across there how much cleaner that makes that. You see right here, this is spray foam. So what we're going to be doing is running this microtopping basically over this edge and down this face like 4 to 6 inches. So there's sheetrock here, and then there's OSB here, subflooring, and there's a gap in between both of these two. So we don't want our epoxy and our microtopping flowing down in there and losing material. So what we did is we shot spray foam all the way around here, and we'll just shave it off flat, and then we're gonna put a drywall corner bead on here, and that way we got a hard metal surface to make a nice edge to. So what we did after we sanded the floor and cleaned it, we put down 1 coat of water-based epoxy, and all that's doing is basically sealing this plywood up so it doesn't suck the moisture out of our next coat. So all these hard lines right here, what we did is we actually took this product called epoxy gel. I'll show you guys what this is. This is what it looks like. And so basically it's almost like Crisco, super thick shit, super thick. This is like tar, and it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. You mix the black and white together till it's solid gray, kind of like this or like this. And so we slope those 1/4 inch to nothings down. So that way we got rid of our hard edge. Now we got all of our gel patch done. Once again, we put that mesh tape or whatever, you can kind of see it right here, and then we put that gel patch over it, and then we sprinkled some sand. And the reason we did this is to make sure our next coat of epoxy has something good to bond to instead of relying on sanding it. So we got basically everything that we've had water-based epoxy down the darker area. Nothing else has been water-based epoxy. Right now our main concern is getting this area that had slope leveled up. So we got all of our seams done, and then what you see here is just basically scrim. This comes in like a 4-foot roll. It's actually over there. That, and then we cut strips, and where these 3 step downs are, right here where they went from 3/4 inch to 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch to nothing, we're trying to taper that to where it's more even across there. We mixed our 100% solids epoxy. We took our roller and just rolled out a thin coat. You can see how wet it looks right here, basically across this whole thing again. And then what we did is we mixed broadcast sand into that. That's what you see there. And it's pretty much like an epoxy mortar. And what we're doing is where these drop downs are from when we step down in the plywood, it slopes, level, slopes, level. So we're basically making this kind of a flat transition across there. So you can see this is like 100% solids epoxy. If you're not familiar, this is what they do metallic epoxies with and other stuff. And we just mix clean broadcasting sand in there. You can see I just got a trowel. You can use denatured alcohol to help the trowel slide, but in this case I don't really need it. And Riley's just keeping some spread out in front of me. What we've done here, we actually tape these at first. And since we're putting a self-leveler down that's going to be close to 1 inch thick, what we did is we used this PVC board. And if you notice on here, we actually took and cut everything exact, so that way nothing can seep down in there. And then we used some of our epoxy gel like we have here and went around these edges where the overcuts were, where they cut out for the duct, so that way nothing can seep down in there. We don't want epoxy, and we certainly don't want our self-leveler just finding a gap and pouring down underneath the subflooring. These are all floor receptacles right here. I'll show you what one of them looks like, but I had them build boxes and put them in the floor so we can self-level up and then do our epoxy membrane on top of the self-leveler, and then we'll do all of our coats of microtopping. And when we're done, what I had them do is put these in here. And the reason we did that is you could imagine if you had a perfectly cut square, how the hell are you going to get it out? So this allows us to kind of squeeze in when you pull these wedges out, and it helps you kind of wiggle it out a little bit better. Now we're putting down our epoxy membrane. So this is a flexible epoxy. So this goes down to about 50 square feet per gallon. So we have our notch squeegee right here. You can see that. So what I'm doing is I've already got all the epoxy poured out. We did a 3-gallon kit, and I'm using this right here, and you can watch it pull this material back. So those notches, they basically gauge the epoxy to tell you how thick it is going down. So you can see how this pulls back, but it has some nice body to it. It actually has some pretty decent depth. So I'm just going to kind of push and pull this around. And once I get this thing
basically gauged out. Then Bub is taking a 9-inch roller and a chip brush, and he's doing his edges over there.
You can see Bub is back rolling everything. He's already done it once, but this plywood was really uneven, so he's hitting it one more time. And now the next step is I'm gonna get this bucket of broadcast sand, and I'm gonna go out there and start throwing this sand. So they say about 80 square feet per bag. So this should be about 4.5 bags of sand to cover this up. So I'm gonna try to keep track of that and be a little bit more modest and a little bit more methodical about putting it out there. I'm not just gonna coat it like crazy, and then if we end up, say I get this whole thing coated and we have 3 more bags of sand, then I'll walk back out there and spread the rest of it to where we get it as even as possible. So before I get into this, typically what you would do is you would be putting a self-leveler down over something, say like this, that's already somewhat level. Obviously this wood substrate is not gonna be exactly perfect everywhere, but that's the point of the self-leveler, is it kind of seeks its own level. But what you do is you use a gauge rake. So say you want to go 1 inch thick with your self-leveler, you have basically a tool like this, not quite as wide, but it has inch cams that come down on each side, and you run that across there, and that's what tells you it's 1 inch. Well, in this case, we can't do that because we're going from 1 inch thick, and then it tapers up and then back down and then back up. So what we're doing is we have our transit set up here, and we shot the high spot right here on, this was our high spot right here. This is where we stopped when we taped our clean line to stop this epoxy and sand. We found the high spot on that edge. And so what we're doing now is we can't use the gauge rake, so we're gonna use this tool here, and it's called a whiskey stick. And they have other tools for this, but basically the guys are putting screws in here at the right height, the right elevation, the thickness that we need approximately every 5 feet. So we have one in the corner here, and we have one approximately every 5 feet. That tool right there is 5 feet. So we're gonna pull this stuff out, and it's just super flowable. I'll try to get a video of that, and we're basically just gonna pat that stuff flush to the top of the screws, and that's the only way we know how to get a floor that is not level. This is called a porcupine roller. And what this does is it breaks the surface tension. So after you get it to the right height, you just roll that across there, and it breaks the surface tension and helps any air bubbles escape. So here's our material out here. You got Bub and Riley. We are using Ardex's V1000. And what we've done, this is probably seen this in some of our other videos, but so we're gonna be mixing 3 bags at a time. We have 3 buckets, 3 containers. And what we've done is we've already pre-measured out the water into a 5-gallon bucket for 3 bags. And what we do is we mark the outside with a Sharpie, and then we cut that. So that way we don't have to measure these 5-quart things 3 times in a row over and over. Well, I didn't have time to update you guys when we were doing this self-leveler, but I hate that I didn't get it recorded, but I will let you know it did not go as planned. I don't know if it was our material, our pallet of material sitting out in the sun just baking, but this took about 40, I think it was 43 bags to do all this, and we went from about 1 inch back there, and it kind of went different heights through here, but then we went to a feather edge, and it just dried super fast. So we had some spots we had to grind a lot of this. This whole side was good, a lot of that was good, but in the middle it was a little up and down, about 1/4 inch, and so we ground it to where it's within roughly a 1/16 up and down. It's pretty good. And then we had some patches we just did, and where we taped our seam, what we did is we used Henry's feather patch. We've talked about that in other videos, and you can go from 1/4 inch to nothing, and it goes right over wood substrate or concrete. So what we did is we basically tapered this off the width of a trowel, so about 1 foot from that little lip that was like a 1/16 of an inch, and we tapered it to nothing. Now what we're doing, just like we did over here, this has got water-based epoxy. We're starting our water-based epoxy and going over the rest of this floor. And it may look weird that we've just done in front of the door, but we want to have an exit strategy. This stuff dries pretty fast, so we're doing 1 kit at a time. So we've actually went along this whole edge all the way around, and then we went all the way to the back rooms back there to start. The reason we did that is so we can have a way to walk out. You always want to have an exit strategy in mind. So all right guys, next morning our water-based epoxy is dry. It's tack free. And what we did first is, I think I mentioned this, but we're gonna end up turning this microtopping down this edge, probably 4 to 6 inches. We're not sure yet, but basically we're gonna make it look like a slab was poured. So it's gonna look like a concrete slab. So what we did, instead of going over this sheetrock that could potentially chip or break off, it's pretty brittle, we actually put drywall corner bead on here. And so that way it's a hard, rigid edge that we can go up to here and then go down here and we can sand that. And it actually looks really nice if you can just lightly sand and barely expose a little bit of that metal. I think it looks pretty cool. So we ran a string line down and ran it all the way around. Once again, we're gonna be doing this down here as well. You can see that sheen on there, that's water-based epoxy. And we're gonna be doing that face to make it look like one thick poured slab. And then the steps will come down here. They're gonna be like solid steel, custom made steps. Go down to that landing, turn, go all the way down to this polished concrete that is only cut so far. We haven't started polishing anything yet, but so all this water-based epoxy is down, and now, just like we did here, we're gonna go through and patch all of our seams with our epoxy gel patch. So we're gonna start in the back here and work our way out of the door. Our epoxy membrane here, we've got our mixer, Miss Brittany, and her 5-gallon bucket. She got all of her epoxy, her A and B ready to go. And we've got our rollers ready, our notch squeegee, we've got everything ready to go. Everything is taped and masked off. Everything is super clean. You can see all the electrical outlets and the ducts, they all been taped, sticking up about a 1/2 inch, including our edge over here so it doesn't just flow off. But we are polishing this basement down here, and we actually just grout coated that so it's protected. If anything does fall, no big deal, it'll come right up. See, we got everything taped all the way around. And once we get out into this room somewhere, we may even go a little bit further and maybe even go into here. I'm gonna drop back with someone and walk back in there after this epoxy settles with spikes, and I'm gonna do the sand broadcast. And we're gonna be roughly 80 square feet a gallon, or 80 square feet a bag. So we're being pretty generous putting this stuff down. And then as I walk in here, someone else is gonna come in with me because I do not wanna leave this tape on overnight or all weekend especially. So I'm gonna throw the sand, and right in front of me, somebody's gonna be pulling all this tape up so that way it doesn't rip any of the sheetrock up. Before we left yesterday, you can see this white stuff right here. This is primer. And this particular product that we're using is made by Duramin. So the whole system is a Duramin system, and their primer is called CP1000. So it goes down white and it dries clear. Before we left yesterday evening, we put down a coat. So the first coat has to dry 6 to 8 hours. So we put this down, went home, came back this morning, and now we're putting the second coat down. So you can see all the edges have been brushed in around all the pipes, all the electrical boxes, all that stuff. So this second coat only has to dry for 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll be actually ready for a microtopping. Hallelujah. So basically, here's what we're going for on this floor. This is a nice charcoal color. Now there's a lot of steps to get to this point. Once again, we're gonna be doing 3 to maybe even 4 coats of microtopping, but that's basically the color we're going for across this floor. And this is from a good friend of mine, Cody Dawkins from Concrete Aesthetics. He did this sample. You see it says 2 cups of pewter right there. So I'm gonna go over here to the mixing station and show you exactly what we're gonna do to get that look. So we have our Scrafino, which is our cement-based product. This is our microtopping. You notice right here it says regular. And what that means is it has bigger sand, so you can go a little bit thicker than some of the other stuff. And what you do is, what is in this bucket is primer, the same thing that we prime the floor with, that CP1000. And so one of these buckets requires 4.6 liters of this primer. And to get that charcoal color that said 2 cups of pewter, we have a simple measuring cup here, and that has been raked off. We just filled it up and then took like a little piece of cardboard and shaved it off to where it was level. We'll put 2 cups of pewter in here. We'll mix it up for a few seconds, and then we'll dump 2/3 of this material in there, mix it for 30 seconds, and then dump the rest of that bucket in there, mix it for about a minute, scrape the sides, and we'll be ready to put it down, and we'll show you what that looks like. All right, guys, so now we're putting down our first coat of Scrafino microtopping. So what we're doing is going around the edges first. You can see over here, Bob has a square trowel. He's pouring a little bit out. He's not flooding the surface. And he's basically just trying to make that as smooth as he can and as thin as he can while getting rid of this sand broadcast right here. So you can tell we've already done all these edges all the way around. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this magic trowel right here. And you always wanna pick your best side. And I don't have the best one here, but anyways, notice once again, I have not flooded this area with this material because it goes a long way. So I can't walk in this with spikes because what will happen is it'll puncture the wood through the epoxy and we'll get outgassing and pinholes. So what I'm gonna do is just reach out here and I just wanna blend into the edges we've already done. So I'm gonna work my way right on around just like this. And I wanna try to get as many of those lines and as smooth as I can, because this first coat is going to dictate how easy and fast our second coat goes. So you can see how nice this lays this down. So if you notice, if you've watched our other videos, I always say the same thing. I always start behind me and I pull around and then I stop behind me. Just like this. So that's basically our process. That's what we're looking for right there. And we're going to go across this whole floor and we'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Guys, quick little update. So we got Riley and Mike out there. They're mixing more. I have no idea what batch we're on. I want to say maybe 9 or 10 or maybe even 11, but let me turn this around. So we've got all the back rooms and bedrooms done. We have worked our way out here into the living area. Here's the transition over our self-leveler that we put down and then onto our subflooring. And you can see across there, it's got a nice transition. Now that once again, this is only the first coat, so it's not perfect, but so far so good. And one thing I want to point out, Bub is working his way around the edges there, and I'm staying on this magic trowel. If you notice, I'm maintaining a wet edge across there. So I always have material right up to this edge, because this material doesn't dry fast when it's thick, but it dries really fast when it's thin. So what we have to keep in mind is, you see we kind of got a weird layout here. So this isn't quite done, but all that is, and so this is our exit strategy where Mike is at. So we have to work our way around and get from there to over here and out this door while maintaining that wet edge. You do not want to get a cold joint with this stuff, especially over here in the sun where we have those windows and the sun beaming through. You can look over there and see that shit's pretty much already hard. So yeah, so far so good. I'm gonna get back to it. We still got to do this face down here, this right here, and it'll make it look like that waterfall edge. And then obviously we got the bottom and then that 12-inch face down there as well. So everybody's doing a good job. It's really looking really nice for the... All right, so it is the following morning after we put our first coat of Microtopping down. Once again, that was Scrofino regular, and it turned out pretty good. You know, you're always gonna have some stuff like that, especially going over a sand broadcast, but that's why we're sanding this. So we have our floor buffer over here, and we're using a 100 grit sanding screen, and you can see we're just kind of buzzing across this floor. There's spots that are a lot smoother than others, but for the most part, it's pretty good for our first coat. We really don't have any crazy burrs or anything sticking up too bad. So Bub is down here. He has sanded the faces right here, and they got that done down there on the bottom, and so he's sanding that. Hey, we got our second coat of Scrofino put down. We had a little issue with it drying really fast, and I had some bigger sands and crap in there that we kept having to pick up. And then we also had a slight color issue where it started to get lighter. You can see it from, that's darker, this is lighter. But overall, it looks good. Just like yesterday, in the back, we started with our 100 grit sanding screen, and then we switched to our 80 grit sanding screen, and it wasn't doing anything. This stuff is so hard. So if you guys have watched one of our other videos, we talk about this. This is a trick we learned from Cody Dawkins. These are 100 grit resin pads that this is the first phase of polishing concrete. So this is resin with diamonds in it, and it cuts really good. So what we did is use spray adhesive and put these on this 80 grit screen right here. and you can see the difference that it's doing to this floor, and it's getting all the burrs and lines and everything out. And we want to get this as smooth as possible with no burrs, nothing sticking up, as nice as we can get it, and get it clean. And then that way our next coat, we're going to be spraying, and it goes down super thin like paint. So we want to get this as nice as possible. All right, guys, next day. Yesterday we spent the day sanding all this, making sure we got any burrs, ridges. We vacuumed it really good, and obviously it needs to be clean. But before we clean it, we're going to be cutting a tile pattern into this. So we're actually going to be doing 4x8 tiles, which is what this OSB is, and we're trying to honor where those were. And you don't have to do that, but it's just an easy way for us to see where they were at, because we have some ghosting in a couple spots. They're not everywhere, but right here, for an example, you can kind of see that seam. So that kind of tells us where they're at, and we're able to measure the ones that we don't know. So what Brittany and I have done is we are basically, this one gets cut, every other one gets cut, like a style, like a staggered tile pattern, or like they would lay out OSB for subflooring. But the easiest way to do that is to pop a line all the way across, and then what we do is just quickly wipe down and erase the ones we don't want. So every other one, just go through and wipe out our chalk line. It's easy as that. You don't have to sit here and try to figure out every single one of these. Just pop a line all the way across the floor, and then erase the ones you don't want much quicker. All right, so we got our 4x8 big tile pattern laid out, and you can see we've already started cutting. So we use a tool called the Cobra by Engravicry, and I'm about to show you in a second how that does. But basically, we're cutting all these long straight lines with that, and then I'm taking a 4-inch grinder with the regular, the same width blade that we're using on that Cobra, and I'm lining this board up. And even though I can freehand cut good with that, if he's off a little bit on that chalk line, I want to make sure that I'm continuing that chalk line straight, even if it's over a quarter or an eighth of an inch or whatever, which he's really close. I mean, he has very few. I'll show you here. You can see how this is off a little bit, and you won't notice that to the eye as long as I continue that straight and I don't hook back. So he's basically cutting all the long ones with that Cobra, and then I'm coming behind him and finishing the cuts as close as we can get to the wall. Now, with that being said, I'm only going to be able to cut up to about right here, so we're going to have to use a tile scribe to go the rest of the way. And so I'm going to terminate all the cuts and then do the ones this way. He actually cut this one, but you can see it's kind of pointless because we don't want any overcuts going that way. So I'm just going to score all these with a 4-inch grinder going this way. And he's got plenty to do through this house going the long way. But you see how nice and straight them are. And that is a badass saw, man. I'm about to show you in a second. That's him coming this way. You got to come all the way down to here. And all right, guys, we got all of our lines cut. Bubba's went through and vacuumed this floor twice, and the lines really don't stand out much right now. But when you put water on this thing, look at that beautiful charcoal color, and you can really see all the scored cuts that we made. And that's closer to the color this floor is going to be once we put that epoxy and urethane on there. So once again, this is like a charcoal color, but then we're going to be grouting all these saw cuts with black, so really should look really sharp. All right, guys, we are ready to start spraying. You see we got everything masked off really well, and Cody Dawkins let us use his Tarazi sprayer, and basically we're spraying this really thin layer of cement like paint. And so my boy Cody Dawkins is up here, decorative concrete extraordinaire. And so what we're doing is mixing, straining, and we're going to go back here and start spraying. All right, guys, we are back. I'm sorry I didn't get any footage of us spraying yesterday. It was kind of had some issues with the sprayer, but finally got it working. And this is what this looks like now. Freshly sprayed, has not been sanded yet. Taking all the masking down everywhere. Really a nice look. So our goal today is we're going to get this thing sanded, get it cleaned, and get some water-based epoxy put down. And that way tomorrow we're going to grout with black and all these saw cuts so it looks like big tiles. But this really is a nice look, and this is, I would say, a 1/16 of an inch. It may be 3/32 or something like that of an inch, but it's very thin and it looks like concrete. So yeah, so far it looks pretty good. Brittany's in here taking all this masking down, doing her Brittany things, and so this is a quick walkthrough across the floor just to show you guys what it looks like after we sprayed it. And once again, this stuff is, it basically goes down just like paint, but with a higher volume. All right, and we are back. Our water-based epoxy we put down yesterday is dry. We just put down one coat. You can see how shiny and glossy the floor is, and you can see every imperfection because of that gloss. Now that's why we're using a matte finish. It has somewhat of a sheen. It's a very low sheen, but you can see the reflection. You know, any little imperfection in this, a lot of people like, and these people like some of the imperfections too. They think it looks more like realistic tile, but I want to dull some of this down, so we went with a matte finish on this. It just, in my opinion, looks way better. So our next step is we're going to be grouting all of these lines, and since the lines are so thin, that's probably a 1/16 of an inch deep and about a 1/16 of an inch wide, maybe close to 1/8. With non-sanded grout, you can go up to 1/8 wide. So I know sanded grout, I'm just afraid it's not going to want to take as good. So we're using non-sanded charcoal grout, which should pretty much be black. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and run that stuff out. And our face turned out pretty good there. They're going to have to repaint these walls. Funny story, well, it wasn't funny at the time, but I was masking up here, putting paper up because we were spraying, and so this is about 12 feet up here to down there, and I had a walkboard, a 2x12, going from there over to the top of a 6-foot ladder, and then I had a 6-foot ladder on top of that walkboard like this. So I was all the way up. I was in between knee and waist high, flush to this, trying to tape up here. And since we have that that epoxy grout down there, ran for polished concrete, and we had all the sand on it from all this broadcast sand, the fucking ladder slid, dude. And so the whole ladder and walkboard slid. So you can see these marks right here. I fell all the way up here, all the way down to the ground, dude. Did this to my freaking leg right there. My hip, my lower back, and my left shoulder, I bounced off that concrete, but luckily it was a little bit more slower fall. Anyways, that has nothing to do with the job, just thought I would mention that. So be careful if you've got sand or anything. I've done that so many times of putting a ladder up on a walkboard, but make sure, you know, that's epoxy down there, and with sand, obviously it's slick, so don't do like I did. This water-based epoxy on here made the grout really easy to clean. This is actually black, although it doesn't look like it right now, but once you put that urethane, it'll really pop with water. It looks really black. But anyways, you see all these marks. We went around 120 grit sandpaper and sanded all the edges, and got that ready to go for the urethane. And now we just got to sand out here, and we'll use our floor buffer with 120 or 100 grit sanding screen, buzz across this, clean it really good, and tomorrow morning we'll be ready to drop the urethane, let it dry, and this job will be complete. But can't wait to show you guys a walkthrough of this matte finish on here. It's really gonna be stunning. Guys, quick little update. Sorry I missed y'all this morning. It is later in the afternoon, so we have ran our floor buffer with 100 grit sandpaper over this whole thing. We vacuumed it real good, and then we solvent wiped it with acetone. And now we're putting this stuff down with an 18-inch roller, and going around the edges with a chip brush and a 9-inch roller around here, and we're trying to keep close to what we're doing so you can see how this stuff goes down. This is already starting to dry. Once again, this is a matte finish, but it's not all the way dry. And if you kind of want to see what it looks like when it's dry, look in that back room back there. how matted out that is. So this is really going to be a nice job once it's done, and we'll show you guys once it's dry tomorrow morning. All right, guys, so it's been about 4 days since our matte finish water-based urethane is dried, and this will be the final walkthrough. Everything turned out pretty nice. I mean, for less than 1/8 of an inch, between a 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch, and then having to level all that up back there. This floor out here was about a 1/2 inch up and down with the subflooring. This thing turned out to be pretty nice. There's some dust on the floor and some other stuff, but we just wanted to show you guys. I mean, there are some minor imperfections here and there, but that's normal with microtopping. It's not a perfect material. Do a quick walkthrough back here. You can see this charcoal and how beautiful some of this details are on this floor, but that's just what's coming through. So there's no lights in here yet. Once they get lights put up, this floor will really charcoal out. Right now it looks really black, except for where this natural light is coming in. So yeah, it'll really look nice once they get all their lighting up. But overall, I think it looks pretty dang good, man. And you could come back if you wanted to, and we actually may do that. We have a couple roller lines here and there, but you can actually put a concrete wax over top of this, either a matte finish or a high gloss. But the wax will just kind of tame all that down, any little roller marks or anything. I mean, you can barely see, like there's a little one right there, and there's a couple out here in the big room. But once, honestly, with this matte urethane, this floor wears really nice. So the more traffic is on it, the better it starts to look, as crazy as that sounds. So anyways, that's pretty much it, y'all. I want to show you this bottom platform and then this turn down edge. So there's our platform, and these stairs will come off of here down to that platform. They'll turn and go down, and then we got our turn down edge here to make it look like a slab was poured, which turned out pretty good. They've got to repaint this wall, and in another video we polished this basement down here, salt and pepper, 800 grit, and you can see that reflection. It looks really nice. So appreciate you guys watching, and let us know in the comment section if you have any questions, and y'all have a good one.